And on that note, hello, Scruffy. I guess we're starting off with a that's what she said joke for stream. That's one way to do it. Um, Hello, happy Tuesday. Sorry, I'm gonna remove the ever pleasant and relaxing waves. You'll get them tomorrow. I was actually gonna ask you if you were doing your Jackbox stream tonight to make sure I could attend it tonight after dinner. So I'm glad you're here. Oh, and I was gonna do research. I should have done research to find out more about the. Okay, so you should be. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if you looked him up, but I was gonna look and see if the author, you know, Tommy Rice, if he was an offensive lineman or not. So I was just gonna read the back of the book. It says he is a game designer and creator. He has been seen in White Dwarf Miniatures magazine and weightlifting magazines, and has appeared in short movies and commercials. He is an ex-football player, weightlifter, and comic geek. This is his first book. So I guess it doesn't say specifically whether or not he was, what his position it was. So. Okay, you're all caffeined up and you're gonna get the stream going tonight, okay? Yeah, I had the same issue too. Like, I think on his Instagram I saw him posting like a shot of him like in his jersey with his number. So he may not have been like as well known as another Tommy Rice, as another, last name Rice person. All right. So we're still in chapter 1. I have like 6 pages to go to finish chapter 1. So we left it off with the paladin being tortured in the dungeon. Here we left it. I should remember where we left it. I think I did. I'm going to read the last sentence just to make sure. Normally, the Legionnaire guards stationed at Icewell would be on high alert with the rumor of a prisoner of such caliber. But they had heard many rumors, and they were tired and already on edge from the wars in the Isles. Recruiting of the soldiers for here to bolster the war forces had reduced the strength of prison's guards, and tired men were careless. Yeah, I think that's where we left off. From above, the raven sat on the rail and watched. It hopped down the length of it to the edge, looking down. Its servo eye whirled and clicked as it adjusted its vision. Its head turned to follow the small procession walking down toward the slab. The prisoner's sight had adjusted, and he was finally able to see who was taking him to his new home. There were 5 leading him to his cell. 2 were large, flabby jailers that wore nurse shirts, only crossed leather straps over the light purple skin of their torsos, marking them as Razium taskmasters or jail sergeants. They wore the same dark pants and boots of the Legionnaires and had pistols strapped on their legs. Hanging from their chest straps were various instruments and tools of pain, easily accessible when necessary. The instruments jingled as the jailers tried relentlessly to push or pull their large prisoner toward the huge steel door of the slab. Beside them were 2 others, Razium guards, one on each side of him. They were dressed in the dark attire of legionnaires of the Razium army, and he couldn't tell if they were human or Razium. Their thick coats had black shoulder armor, and they were helmeted. Their faces were hidden behind the breathers, covering their mouths and eyes, the lenses reflecting the light. They stood off to the sides, their guns raised. The large cylindrical ammo carriers protruding from the side of the woodstock weapons. The legionnaires were there to make sure nothing out of the ordinary happened with this transfer. Normally, there would have been more of them, but at this time of night, with the loss of so many men while capturing the brute, most didn't want the job, no matter the extra pay. Besides, they thought he was just going to the slab to be tortured, like so many others before him. So these four were doing the job that usually took many others to do. Whether assigned or volunteered, who could say? The four underlings were being supervised by a slender, cocky Rasium sergeant. His skin was a slightly darker purple than that of the jailers, and he was dressed the same as the legionnaires, only with a short jacket. From his black belt hung a sword, and his medals were on full display on the left breast of his too tight jacket. He was young, maybe in his late 20s, and his dark hair was short on the sides and combed slickly over with a large part. He was pointing and ordering around his subordinates, putting them in their places and bullying them with his commands. The raven was losing sight of them and suddenly realized it was not alone. It flapped its wings, its cyber eye adjusting as it looked at the newcomer. The very old man in a hooded cloak appeared from the shadows, his long, bony, dark purple fingers reaching to stroke his black feathered friend. "There you are, my pet. Why are you here?" he asked the bird. It cawed a reply. "What have we here that has piqued your interest? The raven blinked, and the servos in its optic clicked as it skipped toward him. The old holdmaster gently picked up the raven and looked down onto the optic. With the touch of a button, it produced a screen of blue in midair, playing back what the raven had been watching. The old man watched its flight back to Icewell, saw the glowing rune, and then the prisoner. The old man's eyes widened as he observed what the bird had seen. He mumbled and nearly tripped as he took a step back. "It's true," he whispered as he turned quickly, almost stumbling once more, and dropped the raven on the ledge. Limping up the passageway, he hurried back to his chambers. The raven croaked twice as it watched him shuffle away, the noise and eerie sound that echoed into the prison before it flew after him. The jailers were trying to secure the prisoner. "You big piece of..." one of the flabby guards grunted as he struggled to hold the large steel-covered clasp that had one of the prisoner's muscled arms folded behind his back. Both guards struggled to attach the prisoner's restraints to the apparatus on the floor. Hold on, I'm going to pause really quick because I just realized I hadn't started the last Stream Raiders battle. Because I'm a pro streamer over here. Distracted. Yeah, there's nothing of importance. It doesn't matter which path we take later. Alright, and no special quests. Nope. Alright. There you go. That should keep the people entertained. Alright. Both guards struggled to attach the prisoner's restraints to the apparatus on the floor. "These things weigh a ton." Really bad English. Really bad English accent is what I think they're trying to speak with. The sweating jailer stated in labored, accented tones. The other was faring no better with the weight, but was able to lock the prisoner's arms in place. Instead of conventional bars or cells, the paladin was shackled face down to an apparatus atop the slab. The Rasium had added it to the prison, a sadist torture device. It was a gold bronze color and had many levers and latches that could be attached to shackles, cuffs, or any number of other restraints. It was made for torture and cruelty to break those they put in it. Cruelty was what the Rasium were known for, and the device had helped them achieve some of the cruelest acts imaginable. They planned to do the same to the prisoner they had now. He, however, didn't look the part of a normal prisoner, nor even that of a Spartan paladin. He was a large man and heavily muscled. Even shackled, he looked menacing. His legs were attached to the device that was latched to the stone floor. His neck and bull-like shoulders set in an iron-covered brace, connected to the device that pulled his head down, allowing his dark hair to hang around his face. His arms were pulled out horizontally from his body, each pointing towards the edges of the chasm, and his shackles had been attached to huge chains that hung 10 feet over the edges. At the end of each chain hung a massive, rounded boulder. The gigantic hanging boulders barely moved as they were set in place. There were long lengths of the chain on rollers that were holding the rocks off the sides. Above the slab stretched miles of networked prisons, girders, bridges, and buttresses built into the stone that led to other torture chambers, and worse, while around and below him was nothing but an endless dark chasm. Once they had locked the Spartan paladin into the contraption, the jailers released a lever, and the full weight of the stones pulled his large shoulders and thick arms taut with stress. Most Spartans would have to use their power or be ripped in half by the weight of the boulders, and that would weaken them quicker and make it easier to break them. This prisoner didn't, though he grunted in pain. Then he spoke, a little more to the left, and it will be perfect. The fatter jailer's head whipped around. Be silent, dog. His sweaty purple skin jiggled as he locked the last rivets of the device, linking them in place with a clack and hiss of alien machinery. The jailer wiped the sweat from his clammy purple skin, flicking it at the prisoner. The dark leather belts crossing his chest were barely able to hold the flabby flesh that had grown to flow over his clothes, his thick arms hanging down over the straps, and his fat. The other jailer didn't look much different, but was a bit more powerfully built. The first let out a sigh as he stood and turned away from the device, holding the prisoner. The prisoner raised his head slightly and looked at his jailer through his dark wet hair. Seems to be a lot of effort just for me. Are you expecting trouble, Rasium? The prisoner asked in a calm, low but hoarse tone. Weights that would tear a man in half pulled down on each of his arms, but he seemed calm, even with the strain on his corded muscles. Hello, Dexy. Yes, I will continue to read to you just like that. I am putting you in the same restraints and torture device as our prisoner. The jailer was surprised he was speaking, but remained smug. He knew the rocks would take their toll soon enough. It is always the same with you people. Okay, this is why I can't say it, because they're trying to write his bad English accent into the writing. So let me see if I can do the bad English accent. Hold on. It's always the same with your people, bagging out tongues too much. Now I sound German. You will lose that tongue or we will cut it out. the jailer said as he touched a cleaver attached to his belt. His accent came through as he was clearly getting irritated by the banter of the prisoner. I know it, Uds. You're not the first paladin I has put here. Really? I know, right? Like, because I see you doing your runs and you're hitting the gym. Yeah, he's huge. I mean, he looks big in that picture, but he's even bigger in person. Like, the guy is just built like a tank. A voice interrupted the jailer. You'll lose your mirth in no time when your interrogation begins, the cocky sergeant snapped as he walked past the prisoner to the edge of the slab, looking off into the nothingness. He dusted off his uniform. The sergeant had been content to watch, but now, with the prisoner's defiance, he felt he needed to show his power. The fact that the prisoner was now chained to the apparatus helped as well. The other Razium backed away from the sergeant. The man was known for his violent temper and seemed to be getting close to losing it. He gathered himself, folding his arms behind his back, looked toward the prisoner, then back to the other fat jailer to assure himself that the prisoner was latched. The jailer nodded to his sergeant, who continued, Yes, we will teach you. You will see. He emphasized the last word. Yeah, you can't really tell on stream. Same body type. Yeah, I know. I trust you. I trust you, Dex. I know that. Oh yeah, Dexy is East Coast Patriots fan. He's hardcore. In fact, that's all he talks about. But he makes allowances for the rest of us to talk European soccer, football, the real football. He has a whole channel in his Discord server for the other soccer, the other football. Yeah, not the best location, but you know, he's faithful. He's a faithful fan. The jailer stepped toward the bridge, ready to leave this man to the torturers and get out of his presence as soon as they could. The legionnaires nearby lowered their rifles and walked toward the bridge as well. The sergeant stepped back from the chasm and began walking toward his men, but stopped in his tracks. He was a cocky one and wanted to put on a show to impress them. Putting a finger on his young, pointed purple chin, he said, I figured it would have been harder to catch a legendary Spartan paladin. You know, I bet you're not even a Spartan. Just some giant half-breed from the valley that got caught stealing food from the pig trough your mother ate from. The other Razium chuckled. Smiling, the sergeant turned toward the prisoner. Well, do be sure. We will cut you and gut you and throw you away when we're done. Here, let me post my Scruffy emotes, or Scruffy can post his emotes, but he's a fan. You can tell slightly. He's a fan. The sergeant paused as he moved closer to the chained Spartan, still grinning, his men watching in the background. Do you hear me, boy? The Razium sergeant bent down, looking at the chained prisoner through his lank, grime-encrusted hair, and then paused as he saw the Spartan's features. The Spartan had raised his head as high as it could go with a collar, a glare of defiance on his face. The Razium was not able to hide the look of shock on his slender face as he looked into the man's eyes. They were haunted eyes. They were brown with a green rim and looked as if they had seen many things and much death. Then suddenly, they flashed to a bright golden color. The sergeant snapped back. His eyes widened in terror as he realized that it was no rumor. The man really was who they said he was. He really was a Spartan paladin. The sergeant stood quickly and dusted his uniform again, hoping the guards didn't see his face as he spun on his heel and headed for the door. The Spartans smirked at the sergeant's reaction, but couldn't savor it, as he truly felt the immense strain on his arms, back, and chest. It hurt. He was doing all he could to push the pain aside and not pass out as he spoke. Of course, if you were going to wine and dine me, you could have brought me to a room first, the Spartan said as he let out a strained groan of a chuckle. The biggest jailer, the powerfully built one, spun around at his mocking statement and started toward the prisoner, raising his mailed hand to cuff him on the head. You dare speak to the... He stopped short as the sergeant grabbed his arm. Hold your hand, fool. Don't let the metal near him or you'll get us all killed. He shoved him back, the jailer's face that of embarrassment. You have heard the legends, the sergeant continued, scowling at him. The sergeant pushed the fat guard back further and turned to the prisoner. You will get your cell, warrior, but first we have someone you need to meet, he said, finding his confidence. Oh yes, you will meet the torturers of this place, and we will see who is laughing after their whips tear your flesh. You will get your cell, well, if there is anything left of you. The last one like you didn't get one. He died like a gutted pig bleeding out. The sergeant sneered as he taunted the Spartan, the other guards laughing with him. Quiet, idiots, the sergeant said, scolding them. They slumped and stopped laughing. Paladin, your time is over, he finished as he turned to go. The large prisoner spoke again. My name is Walker. The sergeant... Walker, Texas Ranger is all I can think of. Sorry. The sergeant was back to him in an instant. He smacked the prisoner in the mouth with the back of his hand. I will tell you who you are and what your name is. His temper and chains restraining Walker gave him false confidence. You are nothing, and your people are dead. We have hunted you all, and none are left. His voice was high-pitched and furious. He was breathing heavily with flushed cheeks. Feeling he had gotten the upper hand, the sergeant smoothed out his uniform, straightened his hair, and wiped himself of invisible dust yet again. Then he rubbed the gloved hand that he had used to hit the prisoner. It ached. Yeah, well, hitting a big hunk of rock would hurt just as much, right? The way he walked away, puffing his chest out to show that he was the victor, it was as if he had just quelled a rebellion. The other guards got out of the way as the sergeant paraded through them, crossing the chasm's rock bridge. They followed him quickly, leaving the Spartan behind. One of the legionnaires was placed outside the door of the bridge to keep guard until the torturers arrived, and the other was sent up top to the observation deck to keep an eye on the prisoner. Looking down at him from the viewing room above the jailers followed the sergeant to another part of the prison as he continued to brag. That was chapter 1. So we can start chapter 2, beginning and end. This is set in Gibraltar Castle, neutral meeting site between the continents. I need a little bit of water to soothe the throat after all that chatting and talking. Oh, confetti. Hold on. I don't have my stream deck, but This will go quickly. There you go. There's your confetti. I didn't travel with my stream deck. Although I should have. It's just I had so much to bring for the week. I still haven't figured out how to get it. No, it's your confetti. I still haven't figured out how to get it to work seamlessly with the redeems. I've tried using the virtual stream deck with Leorin board and just have not gotten it to work. Some of it could just be OBS not, complying, not helping. But I just haven't had the time to continue to figure it out. But when I get my brand new gaming laptop, when I get my brand new gaming laptop, which I did purchase yesterday, I will start all over with OBS and Leorin board on that one. So hopefully it will work. There will be a connection. There will be talking, and then you guys can redeem the effects all you want. All right. Thanks for the BRB, Scruffy. Chapter 2. The island of Gibraltar was an enormous mountain of rock, jutting like a jagged tooth from the sea. Okay, and just, sorry, one aside from previous chapter. So this slab that they put the prisoner Walker on, is it just me, or does it give the impression it's like Kung Fu Panda, the way they put not the tiger. Who was the bad guy? Was he a panther? I know he was a cat, or jaguar maybe. It makes me think like they set him up in the same remote piece of rock surrounded by a chasm with like a tiny bridge, and then he's still gonna be able to escape his prison because he's just a big, beefy, powerful guy, and he's just biding his time at this moment. At least that's the impression that I'm getting with this dude. But I could just be like projecting, because that's what it looked like described to me. Okay. The island of Gibraltar was an enormous mountain of rock, jutting like a jagged tooth from the sea, with a small stretch of land being the only connection to the mainland below. A large castle had been etched into its side. The gray-hued slabs of rectangular blocks ran from the walls around its edges, tracing a path around its face to its summit. Landing platforms filled with different flying crafts displaying banners of their nations hung from the sides of the castle. A white fog had rolled in from the ocean, covering the lower half of the monumental stone edifice, and only the massive gray face of the mountain and the tall towers of the fortress stood out from the white beauty consuming its lower half. Gibraltar Castle seemed a floating fortress, its foundation made from the clouds of white around its edges, the banners of all the nations of the planet fluttering in the wind. Its tall spires broke through the cover of the clouds, reminding all who looked upon it of what the place was and why it had been built here. The castle was a place to mentally fight through and rise above the corruption that had befallen the once great peoples of this world, just as the towers and walls rose above the clouds that tried to cover them. It represented what all those nations wanted: peace, prosperity, and freedom. An explosion ripped through the outer wall, breaking the serene of the castle. Dark smoke poured from the gaping wound that had just been created in its side, mixing with the white clouds, creating the gray fog of war. "Matthias with me!" King Agesilaus yelled to his commander as they raced down the smoke-filled corridor of the castle. Explosions from where they had just come still echoed within the gray stone walls, the sound chasing them, as did the dense smoke from the fight they fled. Matthias and the dozen Spartans with him had turned to follow their liege and friend. Matthias, commander of the elite warriors of the Spartan paladins, was tall with short brownish blonde hair, shaved closer toward the bottom of his neck. His large sideburns curved into a thick handlebar mustache, and his chin was clean-shaven. He was muscled in the arms and shoulders and adorned in his armor. He looked like he'd come from the stories of knights of old. He was still young, being his late 40s, but looked as if he had seen too much in that time. However, he still retained a calm, gentle appeal that made people trust him. He followed his king as they ran down the passage of Gibraltar. Gibraltar, the meeting place of the planet's kings, governors, and dignitaries, was neutral ground. It was a place where all were safe to discuss differences and find ways to stop war, create peace, and innovate with fresh ideas. The king's chief advisor and member of the council, LOK Master Orson, had just given a speech laying out the new treaty's guidelines, and the king was stepping to the pulpit to sign it first, signifying the merger of the nations of Partha Terra. The signing of the Armistice Treaty would have kept the peace for the next century. It would have given the alien Rasium more land and the same freedoms that the citizens of Ultima Thule had. It was supposed to align the forces of the Rasium, the Federation, and their allies, and support the sharing and growth of all. It was then, when all were at their most vulnerable, that the Rasium chose to enact their coup. Led by Nemzor Val, the sagest warlords, leaders of the Rasium, had been vicious in the attacks, slaughtering all in the treaty. High-ranking officials from all sides had been killed, and even the Rasium dignitaries in attendance had been cut down, betrayed by their own. After his first dealing with the Rasium, the king had never truly trusted them and had taken precautions. Now leading his guard, they have fought their way out of the room and against their own teachings of battle had run. The king ran and ran to save his family and kingdom. Continuing through the castle, they had met with more resistance, and the king's dark, gilded ceremonial armor was streaked and scarred from a short but fierce firefight in the Hall of Peace. His white, short-cropped beard had covered with the sweat of battle, his old eyes hollow from the encounter he had just escaped. He was thinking about what had happened. There could have been no violence here. It was a vicious act of war and treason not to keep one's word at a time like this, but to kill your own and spit on the vows and sacred trusts of combat was unforgivable. His anger was boiling at the thought of the betrayal when Matthias interrupted his thoughts. "Sire," Matthias yelled from behind him as they went, sweat rolling down his face as he looked at his runic wrist communicator. "The comms aren't working. We can't contact the paladins or the palace. Dominus isn't answering our hails either. We don't know what they are up against or how far this betrayal goes." "I agree, but we have to make it to the palace, Matthias, to my family. The Labyrinthian is the only way," the king said as he slowed his running. They came to the end of the corridor with passages leading off to the right. "Hey, Miss Suyan. Doing okay. Just doing a quick reading stream on my lunch. We're reading a book called The LOK. That's a paladins and mages type book, if you're into D&D. They came to the end of the corridor with passages leading off to the right and the left. Looking at the large banner of peace hanging on the wall in front of him, the king readied to invoke the tempest and opened the labyrinthian gate, his guards taking up watch around him. Orson? He asked Matthias as he programmed the gilded runic wrist comm he wore. I don't know, sire. I saw him make it out of the hall, but he won't respond to my hails either. We are dark. No one is answering. The king paused. All right. We don't have time to wait. Orson can take care of himself. We'll have to come back for him if we can. Facing the tapestry, the king touched his golden wristband, and the runes on the amazingly crafted device flared to life. A small black sphere appeared in front of him, moving away and taking the light from the area as small lightning bursts played around its edges. A collage of colors rippled into being on the wall, the multicolored hues turning into an oval large enough for an armored man to pass through, the ripples at the opening showing a world beyond. Then the colors blurred to reveal a different place. Then another place appeared inside the opening, the places switching every few seconds until commanded. The king motioned for Matthias to lead the Spartans through the labyrinthian gate, but before the commander could take a step, the end wall of the left corridor exploded outward. Radium legionnaires spilled through the smoky hole, the lenses of their black gas masks catching the light under their Stahlheim helmeted heads, weapons raised. They looked more like beetles than soldiers with dark coats, reflective armored shoulder guards, and various instruments in pouches and on belts. Tubes ran from their masks to breather backpacks on the back of each shoulder. Some legionnaires started laying down heavy fire as others charged down the corridor toward the king and his warriors. The Spartan paladins' reactions were immediate. They were adorned in red-caped golden ceremonial armor. Their nose bridge visors currently open, as was the king's, though his crown was mounted on his. Their armor was ceremonial, but that didn't mean it wasn't effective. The book is about paladins, mages. So basically, a world of people with magic is invaded by purple aliens that have technological power. They are at war. They temporarily bond in a truce to fight dragons, which were the existing adversaries of the days of old. And then after that, they kind of like stay there. They're trying to take over the planet, but they, because of the truce, are just biding their time. And then they decide to betray the truce and kill the king, and the prince goes missing, and one of the last guards, the paladins, is in charge of trying to find the prince and restore the world order. Phalanx, protect the king, Matthias bellowed. The Spartan warriors had already moved, the gauntlets they wore on their left arms crackling to life. The Spartan closed to the advancing Rasium. A squat man with broad shoulders took lead. Point, he ordered as he took position in front of the formation. He raised his armored gauntlet as a circular disc rose from the top of his gloved hand. He pulled a 2-foot spear from his side holster, a Daru half-gun and half-spear. He flicked a button with his thumb, and the weapon lengthened to 6 feet. Down its length was a barrel, and at its tip was 10 inches of pointed death. Alright, let's run the battle, and then we'll take a little snacky break. Adversary means enemies. Alright, and I turned off my music temporarily, but I'll add it so you guys can hear the effects. at least the music from the game. Alright, we'll still have a few bots, but at least there's a normal human, sort of. Alright, so what's the choice to start with? Sweet or crunchy, salty, or fruity? We have the Chex Mix, we have the Ghirardelli Squares, the chocolate caramel, and we have the Lihing Mui Mango. Crunchy, salty? Okay. It's gonna be a lot of ASMR with the crunchy, salty. Actually, we're gonna win this one, I think. Yeah, only 3 enemies. It's probably just the chests that are left. Yeah, and because I was unfortunately late to start, I think I only have like another 20 minutes before I have to go back from my lunch. Right. Alright, and the Cult of the Deep is done. So we're back to the regular Streamlandia maps. Why are you fasting, Suyan? Alright, so we're gonna go with the salty, and we're gonna do the Chex Mix. Just too lazy to cook. That's not a reason to fast. That's why you have takeout. That's why you have restaurants. I haven't had a burger in a while. Alright, we're gonna do a little cheesy square. No Scruffy here, so he's not demanding crunch. And then a little Chex square. Apparently that's all there is. I had more floating. Oh, finally. I found a pretzel in the bag. Little round pretzel. And the highly coveted spiral breadstick. Can you still hear it? I'm not doing it right in front of the microphone, so I don't know how loud my crunching is. I know you're excited to hear the crunchy. Okay, it's far enough away. Yesterday I was told I was doing unladylike things to the microphone. So I'm not gonna lean into the microphone again. I don't know, can Scruffy cook? What's his I don't know, it might take a while to get to you from where Halbert is, which we still don't know where he is. There you go, that answers that. Scruffy can cook quite well. I am not a cook. I'm a baker. So I will make you cheesecake. I will make you apple pie. I will make you brownies. Not cookies. Cookies and we don't get along. they don't behave when I tell them to do things. Look, we have a window pretzel. Not the healthiest of snacks, but I will be going out to dinner with a friend later tonight after work, so snacks is all it is, not actual food. I have strawberries in the fridge that I still haven't tried, and I should before they go bad. In my tiny, tiny hotel fridge. I bake cakes, yeah. I enjoy baking sweet things, and baking cakes is fun. Since we're having Chex Mix, I actually made a checkered cake. It just comes with very fancy molds, so you can put different colored batter in concentric circles. And then when you lay the cake, you know, if you alternate the colors every time you lay it in the mold, when you cut into the slice of the cake, you can pull out and it looks like it's like checkered squares of different colors. I don't have oranges. I debated on getting like the cuties, the little tangerines, but I opted for just getting bananas and strawberries at the market a couple days ago. Maybe hitting the wall on salty. I think tiny oranges are just mandarins or tangerines. All right, next up, we're gonna try the Lihingmoy mango. I haven't had them since the first day. Or clementines, yeah. I don't know if they're still good after 2 weeks. I mean, apples and oranges, probably oranges have a longer shelf life. The two mango slices kind of together. I don't know if you can sort of tell. There's like little flecks on. They're almost the same color, so it's hard to tell that they're different. But that's the Lihingmoy powder. I don't know, you have to ask him, Suyan. I know he opened in NXS and other soft songs, but I just don't know them. Remember, he also had a sore throat for a little bit. I'm not that classy though at eating my food. I'm just not a fan of getting dirty when I eat. Oh, is that 0 sugar ginger ale? Okay, that'll teach me not to have the crunchy, salty stuff because I'm It's just going to go down the wrong pipe. Which is why, as much as I like it, like the chicharrones we were talking about before, it's just really hard on the throat and like the roof of my mouth. Same thing with shrimp chips. I can't have it as tasty as I want. I want to finish the whole bag. It just tears you up and leaves you feeling in a lot of pain once you're done. All right, 10 inches of pointed death. I have to keep saying that because no one else is saying it except me and making the obvious jokes. If Odin was here, I'm sure he'd say it. Thank you, Scruffy. Please acknowledge the cheekiness in that. All right. The arcanium disc that had risen from his gauntlet was getting bigger as it spiraled around itself, clacking together to form a solid shield. The shield was what the Spartans were known for. Layers of metal turned the 6-inch disc into a 40-inch shield with the chevron of the capital of Laconia marking the front. All the warriors had done this in less than 5 seconds from Matthias giving the order, creating a perfect pointed wall between themselves and the intruders. The Spartans opened fire. Commander Matthias, the sergeant of the troop, yelled, "Go, sir. We have the situation under control." The sergeant, Steerpike, was a thick-built man, and mounted on his helmet was the small crest of a centurion. His eyes were calm, but deadly. You know, I didn't say it, but I was thinking the same thing. There's a lot of inches being referenced here. Clearly not on the metric system. It's inches have more heft to them when you say them. Matthias saw the feeling in that look and knew the man would die for his king. Matthias extended his hand, and the centurion grasped his wrist as a warrior. Matthias looked to the king as he nodded his approval to Steerpike. "The honor is yours, centurion," Matthias said, putting on his helmet. Steerpike looked at the commander and then back to the king. "I will leave an opening for you, with it or on it," he said, holding up his shield. He was referring to the Spartan battle phrase, "Come home with your shield or on it." And as a fan of 300 and the Battle of Thermopylae, I was about to say, I'm like, that's very Spartan, very appropriate for your your named profession. Yes, a 40-inch shield, like, do the math. No, I can't. Smaller inches we can deal with. The king nodded and turned from Steerpike. "Matthias, get to others. We need to go." With a flash, the labyrinthian portal pulsed brightly. The king, Matthias, and the 2 chosen Spartans went through the gate, the multiple colors and crackling of light closing behind them, leaving the others to fight the hundreds of Brazium troopers swarming their position. I knew it as soon as that came out of my mouth. You're gonna say that. Steerpike rose from his crouched stance, then hurled his shield into the oncoming press, hitting 2 of the troopers and killing them both before the shield ricocheted to another, knocking the rifle from his hand. The shield then flew back to the sergeant's hand, and he clicked it back onto his gauntlet. "For the king and the Federation," he yelled, and they attacked. Through the labyrinthian gate, the 4 of them traveled over 5,000 miles in a matter of seconds, from one continent to another. It was a powerful weapon, and the true reason that they had been attacked. The king knew that the labyrinthian was what the Razium had always craved, and he had to keep it from them. He exited the gate and stepped into his home. All was quiet as they walked into Sparta, the lion's den, the palace of the king. Nothing was disturbed, and the royal palace seemed at peace. The king looked to Matthias as the other Spartans flanked them. "They might not be here yet," he whispered. "We must get to." An explosion and gunfire echoed through the corridor beyond, cutting him off. "No," he huffed, running toward the noise. It had come from the direction of his chambers. Yeah, it definitely is Suyan. Too much, maybe. As the guard followed the king, Matthias heard crying from the children's room. "The prince," he thought, and broke off toward the boy's room, signaling for others to stay with the king. Arriving, he saw that the door of the prince's room was charred, all but destroyed. Shield up, his spear shrank as he clicked it to his armor and drew his short blade, kicking in the already broken door. The royal room was dark, as if a fire had burned there, and it smelled horrible. The prince was on his knees in the middle of the room, sobbing. Dead Rasium troopers were scattered around the room, and what looked like a burnt, twisted husk of a figure was in the corner. Matthias recognized it, or what was left of it. A magic siphoning creature called the Void. He shuddered. What could have done that to it? He asked himself. He went toward the prince, his shield folding as he sheathed his sword. The boy looked up at him and started to scream, light shining from his hands. "Easy," Matthias said, and he took his helmet off and locked it on his belt. "Lincoln, it's me. Don't worry." Matthias held his hands out and slowly moved to the boy on the floor. The young prince stopped screaming, the light slowly fading from his hands and eyes. He didn't know what was going on. He looked around terrified, his brown hair a tangled mess. It fell over his eyes and into his blackened, tear-streaked face. Matthias looked at him and wiped the soot from Lincoln's face. "There, it's me," he said as he held the boy, hugging him close and rubbing his head to comfort him. The power finally left the prince and fell into Matthias' arms. He fell into Matthias's arms, passing out. The boy was drained. Matthias looked him over. He had a cut on his head, but seemed otherwise unharmed. Matthias picked him up in his arms, and carefully headed back toward the king. The signal on his wrist comm was strong, making it easy for him to follow. He heard fighting in the same direction and hurried down the corridor to where it was taking place. He turned a corner to see the king cut down the last of the Rasium legionnaires. The king then scanned the room and seeing Matthias holding his son, sheathed his blade and ran to his commander. The king touched a rune on his helmet and the faceplate retracted. Matthias could see he had been crying. Long tear streaks covered his face, running into his short-cropped beard. Only one of the Spartan paladins was with him. Her name was Nyx, and she was breathing heavily. "My lord," said Matthias, walking to him. The king held up his hand to stop him from talking and spoke instead. "We found the things responsible for the attack. We left none alive, though they did the same." He paused to compose himself and gritted his teeth. "They were not here for me. They didn't think I would return. They wanted to sever my line." Looking to his son in Matthias' arms, he reached for him, taking the soot-covered boy. He hugged him tightly. "What happened to him?" "He was defending himself from a void, sire," Matthias said with pride in his voice. "He stopped them." Matthias paused. "He has power. His room showed that." "I know he does," the king replied. "They wanted him. They know what he is capable of, and they need me dead so they can use him. That was the reason for the peace meeting. It was all a lie. We can only guess what the rest of the paladins are facing." He said, stating the obvious, more to talk out his grief than to inform his second. His face softened. "Matthias, you have to get him out of here. You must go." I will meet you after this is over. I can't leave you, Matthias pleaded, stunned at what he was hearing. You must take him and go, King Agesilaus yelled, the rage and hurt inside him bubbling over. Must, my friend. He lowered his voice as he tried to compose himself again. They have already taken the others and my queen. He stopped talking, pain and grief filling his face as he barely managed to hold back the tears. All right, I'm a little bit over, so I will have to pause it here until tomorrow. Sorry, it's in the middle of such a cliffhanger. I did see my wonderful friend Dana Baker Music has come on, so I think we can raid her. So I don't know if she's done with her. Yes, you're welcome for all the inches. You're welcome. So we can raid Dana. And I will see you guys tomorrow when we continue. Hopefully into the rest and finishing chapter 2. And I will try not to choke on more crunchy snacks. Apparently they're a hazard when you're reading. So maybe not the best choice. Alright. Let me set this up. Alright, there we go. So thanks again for keeping me company on my lunch hour. Thank you for the hydrate. Thank you for the confetti. And I will catch you guys tomorrow again. All right. Bye.